are listening to the most comprehensive paranormal archive on the internet.
Welcome to Salsido Paranormal. I'm your host, James Salsido, and tonight I'm covering more haunted places in the U.S. As always, you can find all episodes of the show along with links to social media, ways to listen, and ways to support the show at the website, and that is salsidoparanormal.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.com. Support is never expected but always appreciated, as there are expenses in making these shows. And there are many ways to support the show. You can share the show with others and rate and review it on your favorite podcast platform. You can sign up for the Patreon feed and get all the extra content there for as little as $1 a month. If even half of the audience that listens to the show was able to do that and did that, that would be a huge help. But again, just keep in mind what I said earlier. It's never expected, but always appreciated. Also, there is the merchandise store, and that is, you can find shirts and some other items there with designs made by friends of the show. And of course, if you wish to do so, you can also make donations through PayPal to the show. And also, please follow friends of the show. That would be Jen, the Arcane Observer, who has her own channel and is the co-host of this show on Saturdays whenever she's able to join me. And Ricky of the Anything is Possible podcast, who does a paranormal themed show on Sundays, which I co-host as well. And then Michael Strange, host of Troubled Minds Radio, which I co-host frequently there as well. And the Troubled Minds Radio Network, KUAP Digital Broadcasting, where you can hear all kinds of amazing shows, as well as my own online 24/7 for free. So a few things I always like to mention here when it comes to these shows on haunted places. How it works is I get a little short list of places in each of the states in the U.S., and I look into them, and if I can find enough articles and things on them, then I get a description of the place written up, and then share the links to a couple of the articles in every episode description so you can check them out yourselves. Because I don't always get to all the information for every location I have on these shows. Sometimes we run out of time, and so that's why I include the links so you can do your own research. And also another reason why I do that is so you can find out what the current state is of a location, because articles are published at a certain point in time, and sometimes things change between that publication date and the current moment. So please make sure whenever you're thinking about going to visit a place that it is okay to do so, and follow all the rules and scheduling for that visiting that place, because I do not recommend trespassing for any reason. And also the last thing, as I say often in these shows, is I apologize in advance for anything I do not enunciate or pronounce clearly enough. Words are hard and names can be as well, so I'll do what I can, and we'll go from there. So right now we are still on the state of Mississippi, and this first location I'll talk about here is the Longfellow House, and or it's also called Bellevue. And excuse me, this is a mid-19th century waterfront mansion. I've heard of Bellevue. I've never heard of the Longfellow House. Not sure if it's the same place or not. In Pascagoula, Mississippi, with a documented history tied to slavery and a long local reputation for violent residual hauntings. Historical background. The house, originally called Bellevue, was built around 1850 to 1852 for Captain Daniel Smith Graham, a New Orleans-based slave trader on a large tract facing Pascagoula Bay. Constructed of native pine and cypress with a slate roof and dormers, it's a raised Greek Revival cottage with a full-width gallery and a notable self-supporting spiral staircase leading to the third floor. The Graham family's involvement in the slave trade and reputation for extreme cruelty fed early stories that stains on the third floor came from, again, people. After the Grahams left, the house reportedly sat vacant for periods, which encouraged its early haunted reputation in the community. In 1902, it was purchased by W. A. Pollock. Under his family, it took the name Bellevue, and they owned it until 1938. Mayor Frank Canty, not sure, briefly held it. Then Ingalls Shipbuilding, I couldn't get past that word there for a second, couldn't figure out what it was, bought it around 1940 or 41, expanding the grounds into an exclusive resort complex with cottages, hotel rooms, dining, pool, and golf course, and renaming it the Longfellow House from a romantic but unproven association with Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Longfellow legend and preservation. Local lore claims Longfellow stayed there and was inspired by the bay to write the building of the ship, but historians have found no evidence he ever visited the house. The name is considered literary fantasy. Ingalls and its successor operated it as a resort hotel into the late 1950s, after which several private owners ran it as a hotel, with increasing financial and physical decline. In 1993, Richard and Diane Scruggs bought the property and funded a multi-year restoration. In 1999, they donated it to the University of Mississippi Foundation, which has used it for receptions, parties, and charitable events. Core haunting themes. A persistent legend claims that enslaved people were, and they go into details here, sometimes killed on the third floor, leaving stains that cannot be removed. This area is often described in modern accounts as the most active and oppressive part of the house. Let's see. Some local tellings add pirate treasure and a renegade priest, in quotation marks there, to the lore. And other things here I'm not going to get into. Again, some of these things get just a little too dark. All contributing to the building's reputation as a magnet for a tragedy. Let's see here. The house's long vacancies between owners, weathered appearance, and visibility from Beach Boulevard helped cement it as Pascagoula's iconic haunted mansion in local imagination. Reported paranormal activity. Numerous stories describe apparitions of enslaved people, including accounts that the house was haunted by those who were there and murdered there, particularly linked to the upper floors. Visitors and self-styled investigators have reported unexplained footsteps on the hardwood floors, especially after hours when the building is believed to be empty and locked. A frequently mentioned figure is a woman in a long, light-colored gown, seen near upper story windows or balconies, sometimes described as drifting rather than walking. That's always fascinating because that, to me, is just how does that work? Um, are are figures that sort of just drift or float or fly? Doesn't that sort of indicate a possibility of an awareness that they are not a physical form, so to speak? That they can just move by, I don't know, thought and use of energy? I'm not sure. Anyway, just something I always wonder about here. Uh, let's see, modern eyewitness stories. Contemporary visitors describe hearing banging on cars, tapping on windows, and seeing shadowy or bloody-looking figures peering from uh, upper dormer windows as they drive past at night. Some people claim to have captured anomalous figures in photos or videos taken from the parking lot or road, only noticing the face or form in an upstairs window when reviewing footage later. That's always fascinating. Because if that's true, then that's something they didn't plan on getting. Anecdotal accounts describe interactions with named spirits such as Sammy and Henry, in quotation marks there, perceived curses tied to the original owner, and warnings from entities to leave the property quickly or avoid being trapped there, reflecting strong local belief in the house as an actively hostile haunting. Let's see here. More folklore and history uh, how folklore and history intersect. Historically verifiable elements, the Graham family's slave trading background, reports of their cruelty, and the house's long periods of abandonment provide fertile ground for stories of vengeful enslaved spirits and residual trauma. The romantic but false Longfellow connection overlays a literary sheen on what is otherwise a site associated with enslavement, war, and economic boom and bust cycles. For modern paranormal enthusiasts, Longfellow House, or Bellevue, sits at the intersection of antebellum history and Gulf Coast ghost lore, with narratives that shift between tragedy, curse, and residual haunting, depending on the teller. So that's where that one ends. I'm really curious about the whole floating aspect. That might be something I have to look into for a show at some point. Just a whole show on that topic alone, because it's something that I don't know why. I mean, I guess I always thought about, but I never thought to mention it on a show. But the aspect of when apparitions that look like they're regular people, when they float or fly, uh, in other words, when they're not moving like a physical person could, usually. Again, there are reports of levitation in people as well, here and there. But speaking in general here, when they're moving like that, when they're floating or flying, doesn't that wouldn't that indicate some kind of awareness of what they are at that point versus just what they were? Um, I mean, I guess they could still be walking and not want to float or fly as well, but it's really fascinating, that whole aspect of all this, how that works. But then, yeah, just the tragedy, and so many other places I've read about and covered on this show so far already, on this series already, have that history of the past there of slavery and the the things and the energies and the trauma and the emotions that can supposedly leave behind to maybe cause paranormal activity, to cause hauntings. This is hardly the first location that has brought that up, and I'm sure will not be the last in this entire series, which is a long series. So you have to go back and listen to more if you're wondering which ones places I'm talking about, because honestly now I can't remember. Gone through too many of them. Moving on to the next location here. This is Chapel of the Cross Cemetery in Madison, Mississippi. Madison County, Mississippi. And this is surrounds a Gothic Revival Episcopal chapel built in the 1850s on the old Annandale plantation, and is best known in paranormal lore for the, in quotation marks here, Bride of Annandale, in quotation marks, said to mourn eternally at her fiancé's grave. Historical background. The Chapel of the Cross was conceived as a family chapel for planter John T. Johnstone on his Annandale plantation. He died in 1848 before construction began, and his widow, Margaret Johnstone, oversaw the project. Enslaved laborers, here we go again, handmade the bricks on site. Artisans finished the details, and the Gothic chapel was consecrated on September 19th, 1852 by Episcopal Bishop William Mercer Green. Margaret, let me see here, lost my spot. Okay, Margaret deeded the chapel, and about 10 acres to the Episcopal Diocese of Mississippi in 1851, with surrounding land reserved as a burial ground for family, neighbors, and Johnstone heirs. The cemetery developed ornate wrought iron family enclosures, including the Johnstone plot, with elaborate floral and vine ironwork, and the prominent grave of Henry Gray Vick, central to the site's ghost stories. The Bride of Annandale legend. Local tradition identifies the main ghost as Helen Johnstone, youngest daughter of John and Margaret Johnstone. And it is Johnstone, so I just want to make sure everyone knows that. Not saying the word Johnston weird. Remembered as the Bride of Annandale, Helen was engaged to Henry Gray Vick, but he was killed in a duel just days before their planned wedding in May of 1859, and folklore says, of course this is folklore, keep that in mind, she wore her wedding dress to his funeral at the chapel. Paranormal accounts describe a lady in white, thought to be Helen, seen walking among the tombstones or seated near Henry Vick's grave, sometimes quietly weeping. Witnesses also report soft sobbing, a faint wedding march on the breeze, and an overall atmosphere of grief around the Vick grave and the nearby bench where she is said to sit. Other spirits and manifestations. Another figure sometimes reported is the Weeping Lady, identified in some tellings as Margaret Johnstone, seen or sensed grieving at her husband's grave. Her presence is tied to stories of her lifelong mourning and attachment to the chapel and family plots she helped establish. Broader paranormal reports at the chapel grounds include unexplained late-night organ music, disembodied manic giggling, that's a different one, footsteps, and intermittent blood-like stains appearing on the chapel floor with no clear source. One strand of lore involves a troubled caretaker who allegedly died I'm sorry, who literally killed his wife in the chapel and later died as well there. Current stories mention a male apparition pacing between the pews after dark, though this part of the narrative is more folklore than documented history. Let's see here. Contemporary access and investigations. The chapel and cemetery remain an active Episcopal parish site and historic landmark, so the grounds are typically locked in the evening to deter vandalism. In local legend, so I lost my spot. Oh, and in local legend, to, in quotation marks, give the ghosts their privacy, in quotation marks, which is actually not a bad thing. Anyway, modern visitors and amateur investigators report shadow figures, cold spots, and the sensation of being watched, along with occasional personal anecdotes of seeing a bridal shape, so I guess I mean the shape of a bride's dress, in a window or along the paths near the graves. For research or a potential visit, focusing on the Vic grave, the Johnstone family plot, and the chapel interior, when permitted, will align most closely with the core history and the strongest strands of haunting lore at Chapel of the Cross Cemetery. So that's where that one ends. We still need to do a show just on graveyards and cemeteries because there's just so much there. And I mean, there's so much there just in terms of folklore, even if there's no history tied to apparitions. But there's also just so much stories of activity in places. But then there are cemeteries and graveyards where nothing is reported, nothing anomalous is reported. There are also cemeteries and graveyards where not just ghosts of or apparitions of people are seen, but animals. There's cemeteries where people's devices, when they're visiting there, will not work. I've found accounts of people having experiences where they see almost like a Grim Reaper type figure at cemeteries as well, but also just hooded figures with glowing eyes, or even one. This is a few years ago, I think, but I vaguely remember one account of someone who saw a figure in a cloak and a hood, but inside the hood, that was like an apparition of a person made of this green light. So there's just all kinds of activity, and so it's things that don't match with just regular, the appearance of regular people. So that's really fascinating. We'll have to do a show on that at some point, graveyards and cemeteries. Maybe one of our Saturday shows. But yeah, so that's definitely all the time we have for these stories in this episode here. Not enough time to get into another one. It's really fascinating how just in doing this series we find all kinds of patterns and all these things. And I do really think I'm going to make a note of that after I get done recording here to do we did a show on levitation and sort of abilities of the mind of the living breathing human form. But I don't think we've done a show on just the overwhelming reports throughout time, of course, of floating or flying apparitions. And that could be something that could also be a show. So I guess I have a couple of notes to take here. But anyway, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you all for listening, and I will talk to you all next time on Salsido Paranormal. Take care.